This is supersonic Wi-Fi from Xfinity. It's fast.
So gaming with your niece has never felt more intense. Hey, what does this button do?
Unbeatable internet, only from Xfinity.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition, a training camp edition, a very special training camp edition of Inquirer Live at Gameday Central, sponsored by Xfinity. Today, we're kicking off the Eagles season with our very first segment of the 2022 season. We just left the NovaCare complex where the Eagles have been working diligently at training camp, which began last Wednesday. I'm Eagles beat reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer, Josh Tolentino, and I am joined by my co-host every time. You guys know who he is, my fellow beat reporter, EJ Smith. EJ, man, it has been quite a bit since the last time we gathered for one of these Gameday Central shows. It feels so good to be back with you, man. How was your off season?
My off season was great. I feel like, every off season, I sort of have a while where I'm really enjoying the downtime. And then it's usually like 10 days before camp starts, I start to get the itch. It's like I'm ready to get back out there. I'm just ready to get back to work. So it's good to be back. You're right. We've been gone too long. So I'm happy. I'm excited for the show today. Yeah,
like what I mentioned, EJ, we just got back from training camp practice. It was a steamy, I think, 90 degrees today. And look at you. You got, both of us got a TV camera ready for this show. Just want to remind everyone back at home, as many of you know, and we welcome our new viewers throughout the season. We'll be coming to you live before every single game to tell you what you need to know about the Eagles' latest news. EJ, where can they find us?
Yeah, that's right, Josh. So they can find us at Inquirer.com/Eagles Gameday. That's where we'd like to hear from you. Since Josh and I will talk about and respond to some of our favorite reader comments here once the season starts, we'll be here every week for What You Said, a segment of the show. It's honestly my favorite segment because, you get to go through some of these crazy comments.
Yeah, no doubt, EJ. All right, let's get into it. It has been a hectic offseason for these Eagles. EJ, last year they went 9-8. With Jalen Hurts, his first year as the starting quarterback, a new head coach in Nick Sirianni. Now that duo enters year two together after reaching the NFC wildcard game. I think it starts and ends with Jalen Hurts, EJ. Let's start the discussion there. All throughout the offseason, the Eagles have made a plethora of moves on both sides of the ball. But let's concentrate at quarterback, how they've surrounded Jalen with weapons, how they've done their best to make him comfortable heading into the third year of his career. What have been your observations of Jalen Hurts at training camp through 1 week?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like this time last year, we were all talking about the 1-year audition Jalen Hurts is going to have to sort of prove that he was a long-term answer. And, I think that most people would agree that last year he kind of got like an inconclusive. I think he did some things really well, well enough to earn the job for another year. But there were also some question marks, about whether or not he can be the quarterback, long-term if the Eagles want to have sustained winning and meaningful winning. We saw, obviously it's kind of like a bad taste that was left in our mouth with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers playoff game. That was not one of his stronger outings and sort of raises the question, can he, pass at the level that the Eagles need him to pass at? But, so far a week through training camp, it's been up and down. I think that's a fair way to describe what we've seen from him. Last year there were some practices where, it was like, the offense couldn't get anything going, and there were real concerns. I've never really considered Jalen Hurts like a practice player. He's the type of guy who does a lot of his best work out of structure, extending plays and making plays with his legs, which is stuff you don't really get in training camp. But that said, there have been a couple of practices where he's looked really sharp and efficient. There have been other practices where accuracy may have been an issue. He's had a couple of decisions that, even Nick Sirianni has said that he would like to have back. But, all in all, I think that it's been I would say that it's been slightly positive. If I had to give it a grade, I'd maybe give it a B+ right now.
And I think I would agree with you, EJ, being able to watch Jalen Hurts conduct practice. Again, over the past week, the Eagles had their first practice last Wednesday, so they're right at the mark of week 1 into training camp. EJ, Jalen Hurts actually spoke to us earlier today, right before we got ready for Game Day Central. And a lot of the questions that were centered around this specific availability, EJ, were on A.J. Brown, one of the big offseason additions. The Eagles acquired him via trade and with the Tennessee Titans. And not only that, they went ahead and subsequently signed A.J. Brown to a $100 million deal, a big money extension made A.J. Brown one of the top 5 wide receivers paid on an annual average basis. EJ, not just him, guys like Zach Pascal, Devontae Smith last year. These are ways that the Eagles are doing their best moves to try to make Jalen Hurts comfortable, kind of like what you had just explained heading into year through. And not just that, we have to remember they have a top tier offensive line, in my opinion, definitely one of the better units in the league, a top 5 unit. But EJ, let's concentrate really quick on A.J. Brown. Has he been as advertised in practice? Maybe from a team perspective, that's to be seen. But man, in my honest opinion, when I watch A.J. Brown line up every day, he's about as physically as imposing as you think he might be.
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch him and Devontae Smith together because they do things very differently. Well, let's put it this way. They go about things a lot differently, but the end result's the same. Both of those guys are very detail-oriented guys. And, it's tough with receivers in training camp at times, but I would say that A.J. Brown has been as advertised. I don't remember who it was that said it, but they said that A.J. Brown is a pads player. That we asked about A.J. Brown the first couple of days of camp, and they said, well, listen, that's a pads player right there. I'll take it one step further. That's a Sundays player, man. Like, that's the guy who is really going to shine when you're in a game. He's the type of guy who, the Eagles aren't going live very often. They're definitely, with the ones, they're never going live to the ground. They barely do thuds. So you don't really get to see, the true talent that AJ has after the catch. But it's there. And even just the physical, like you said, he's an imposing force out there. And, they've run a couple of slant routes to him where you can just tell that he's got the explosiveness to get separation on that slant. And then that once he catches the ball, he's going to be a force to bring down. He's going to be a difficult guy in the open field to tackle. So, it's funny, during practice, literally like an hour and a half ago, he caught, I think it was maybe an out route or a flat route. He was headed to the sideline and he catches the pass, and Nakobe Dean is like in the general area. And they blew the play dead because, again, like they're not tackling to the ground. And, our colleague and Jeff McClain and me are watching, and we both kind of agreed, like, I don't think Nakobe Dean's making that tackle. So I think that's where A.J. Brown's really going to shine, is in real game situations. But so far, I do think he has been as advertised. It's been impressive to watch him work so far.
Certainly, I think any of our viewers know how big I am on Devontae Smith and, the rookie season he had, despite, one could argue the limited opportunities in the passing offense, heading into this second year of Nick Sirianni. I think we might expect them to pass some more, especially, again, with that big acquisition of A.J. Brown. Speaking of big acquisitions, EJ, a lot of people like to talk about the offense, but I think really we're going to see one of the biggest beneficiaries of this offseason will be defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon. And I'll go ahead and mention really the biggest additions to the defense from this offseason that you can go ahead and pinpoint, each whatever guy you want. But obviously we have to start with top pick Jordan Davis, the nose tackle from Georgia, the college football's best defender last year. Linebacker Kaiser White, a stat sheet stuffer from the Chargers. And then you've got the big guy coming home, Hassan Reddick, there at the edge. And the Eagles have been experimenting with him as a linebacker in coverage. And then James Bradbury to really solidify that cornerback group, joining Darius Slay and slot corner Avonte Maddox. EJ, all of last year, we peppered Jonathan Gannon with questions about his scheme, about the pieces that he had in place. It really seemed like he was kind of trying to play, how would you explain this, chess with checker pieces? It seems like going into this year, he has much more suitable weapons in regards to what he's trying to implement here in Philadelphia.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think that, last year, it's obvious that the league was impressed with Jonathan Gannon, even though the Eagles defense underperformed a little bit relative to the talent that they had. And I think this year, it kind of, at least the offseason moves sort of showed you, okay, well, maybe he didn't have the pieces that he really needed to run the defense the way that he wanted to. It's funny, at the beginning of the draft prospect, you mentioned Jordan Davis, who is certainly the biggest addition that they made, physically at least.
6'6", 340.
I mean, it's unbelievable. I thought Jordan Mailata was huge. I feel like Jordan Davis might not be as tall as Mailata, but he might be bigger. But it was funny at the beginning of the draft process. I saw a couple people mocking Jordan Davis to the Eagles, and I remember thinking, well, the Eagles have never really wanted a nose tackle. And I started asking around, like, would they really go after a guy like Jordan Davis? And you start hearing like, yeah, like they might be interested in a guy like him. And it kind of makes sense now with looking back and looking at the way that they've run their defensive front during camp so far. They do want a guy that can cover the nose at times. It's not going to be, they're not, there's a lot of talk about 3-4, 4-3. I kind of go like odd or even more than, those two terms. Cause like, they can have as many guys in the line of scrimmage as they want. Are they covering up the nose or are they covering up the center? And a lot of times when you see Jordan Davis out there, he's playing the nose. He can play some other spots. He's athletic enough to do it, but he gives Gannon the flexibility to run the front that he wants to run. And they are going to run both. There are going to be times where they've got 4 traditional down linemen, which is what Eagles fans are used to seeing, that typical 4-3 defensive front that, so many defensive coordinators that the Eagles have had in the last decade or so have run. But there are also going to be a lot of odd man fronts where you see Davis covering up the center. You've got Javon Hargrave and Fletcher Cox next to him, and you've got Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat on the outside. And that's a really good defensive front. The Eagles didn't really get the sack production that they're accustomed to getting. Last season they were 31st in sacks, probably a little bit better in pressures, but still, outside from Javon Hargrave and Josh Sweat, there weren't a lot of big producers. They kind of have made sure that they have a group of 5 guys across the board that can win one-on-one matchups, and I think that's really going to bode well. So yeah, I mean, I think that the Jordan Davis addition is really going to open things up, and I also don't want to downplay Hassan Reddick here, because I mean, that's a guy who is in some elite company as far as sack production in the last 2 years. I think he's still an ascending player because this is kind of a relatively new position for him in the league. He's bulking up and being, more of a pure edge rusher. I think that those 3 guys, Hargrave, Davis, you could throw Sweat in there, and Reddick, like those, even if those are just your 4 out there, that's a really, really good front. So.
Definitely, EJ. So we've touched on the offense. You just expanded on the defensive additions and how that will help Jonathan Gannon. What about the overall status of the team, EJ? Let's transition to health, which is so important here throughout training camp. Obviously, at the end of August, at the end of this month, teams are due to submit their final 53-man rosters. Right now, there are 90 players on the team, so a lot of guys are fighting for spots. So these reps, this practice time is so valuable. And again, we want to just touch base on the health status of the team. EJ, I think, I was looking through the list of players, and I think really there have been 4 injuries that are worth discussing. Jason Kelsey, their longtime center, he missed the first practice. They've got this new diagnose of COVID progression. Obviously, he's been back on the field since. We can talk about the beneficiaries, from that term, and Jason Kelsey being out. Tight end Grant Calcaterra, the rookie draft pick out of SMU, he has a hamstring injury. He's the first player on the team to suffer one of these soft tissue injuries. Wide receiver Zach Pascal, we haven't really seen much of him at all. A big Nick Sirianni guy. Sirianni played a big role in adding him to the team before they got AJ Brown. He's been out, unfortunately, with food poisoning, EJ. And Nick Sirianni, he tries to. I think the other day he accidentally kind of was being a little bit too descriptive of describing what Zach has been going through. And then Greg Ward today popped up with a toe injury that he must have suffered yesterday. EJ, from that list of Kelsey, Calcaterra, Pascal, Ward, What I guess has caught your eye the most in regards to the health, overall health status of the team?
Yeah, I mean, those guys notwithstanding, I mean, injuries are going to happen during camp, and they're going to be overly cautious with guys when they do get hurt at this time of the year. This is the healthiest that I've seen the Eagles in a really long time. It's funny, like I was thinking, to pull our viewers behind the curtain a little bit, the first day of camp, if there's always like that anticipation for they're going to put somebody on PUP and you have to be ready for it and who's going to write it and who's going to bring their laptop out. And it's not really my favorite part of the job because, everybody's excited to see camp and all of a sudden it's like, all right, somebody has to write that so-and-so is on PUP and we didn't see that coming. And this year, the beginning of camp came and went. And it's like, wait a second. Like, there were a couple guys who went on, but no surprises. And it's like, that is not typical for a team, to really just not have any surprises, come into camp that healthy. Like I said, it's the healthiest that the Eagles have been in a long time. We should add Quez Watkins. He missed the second half of practice with an illness. He was out there for the beginning of practice. Actually was, had a couple good reps in one-on-ones. And by, the end of, by the last team session, we noticed like, oh, wait, he's in street clothes. But yeah, I think generally, Grant Calcaterra was having a decent camp. Nick Sirianni said he was having a good camp. I thought he was showing some good things and kind of making a case to be that sort of like receiving backup tight end. They've got Jack Stoll, who can serve more as a blocking tight end too behind Dallas Goedert. But yeah, I thought Calcaterra was having a pretty good camp. I don't know how serious it is. I don't like to speculate on stuff like that too much, but I will say that like the way that he went down, it didn't seem like, it was anything like, scary or serious. It kind of seemed maybe like something more nagging, and he walked off on his own power. So yeah, I'd say the Calcaterra injury is the one that really, I'm interested to see how it impacts his ability to make the team, because I do think he showed a lot of good things before he went down.
I'm going to use this moment to share some shine on EJ's work. Most recently, he wrote an article that can be found at Inquirer.com. That's where we have all our Eagles coverage all throughout training camp, all throughout the season. But EJ touched on really the length of practices and the intensity level. Really, I think EJ today might have been their longest practice, over an hour and 15 minutes. But generally, they've been between, again, they're only 4 or 5 practices in, but they've been between 50 minutes to that 1 hour, 10-minute range. So nothing too wear and tear on the body. And not just that, but Nick Sirianni has definitely listened since he's gotten here last winter, to his veteran players, guys like Fletcher Cox, Lane Johnson, Jason Kelsey, on the status of their bodies. That's constant communication going on between those veterans and the coaching staff on having a assigned vet day, or, practice going a little bit lighter on some days. Because again, we have to remember, EJ, we're in week 1. The Eagles have 2 joint practices lined up later in the month at Cleveland and Miami. And those can be some really hot summer days for the team. EJ, it's time to transition to one of our favorite segments. I want to remind everyone viewing back home, everyone, no matter where you're viewing, whether it be on Twitter, Facebook, on YouTube, at Inquirer.com. Please submit your questions via tweets and also in our comment section at Inquirer.com/Eagles Gameday for you to have a chance, these questions to be read off in our next segment. EJ, I'm going to start with this first one, a spicy one from Sports Box Flyers. He or she asks, will the Eagles trade for Bengals safety Jesse Bates? EJ, we talked about all the moves that the Eagles did make. One of the areas that they really didn't address too much, up until I guess the last second before training camp was safety. EJ, what is your take on the state of the safety position for the Eagles?
Yeah, so I don't think. I mean, listen, you can never count the Eagles out with big names and trades. That's Howie Roseman's MO, is he always makes the call, sees what it'll cost. I mean, it wouldn't shock me at all if he's made a call to see what the Jesse Bates cost would be if he is going to get traded. I don't see the Eagles doing that. I feel like they're at a point now where their draft capital is just too important to give up for a safety. I am not positive how valuable safeties are in Jonathan Gannon's scheme yet. I haven't gotten a good sense of like, does he need like that difference maker, best in the league safety? Because like you got to pay those guys. The safeties are becoming more and more valuable in today's league, and I think the league is starting to catch up with that with contracts. So because of their salary cap situation, because of the ultimate long-term question marks they have at quarterback, and the way that they've hoarded draft capital, pushed it off into the future to maybe address that position at some point. Jesse Bates trade this year doesn't seem like something that would make a lot of sense. I feel like, they're a year or two away from making like a win now move like that. You asked about the safety group. I'll be honest, one of the biggest things that surprised me during camp so far is Marcus Epps. I mean, he has had a really good camp. And it's like, there's a couple of guys like that who kind of fall into this category of like, we've seen them for a while, but this year that just seems like there's something different. And when you ask them like, what's different? They say the game has slowed down for me. The playing time that I've gotten has really led to me being more comfortable out there, me being able to think less about what my assignment is and more about what the offense might be doing. And, Marcus Epps had a really nice pick against Dallas Goedert. Goddard was it was like an out route in the red zone period in the back corner of the end zone. And I mean, Epps just jumped the route and made a great play on the ball. He's had a lot of bright moments in camp. Honestly, I think it's fair to say that he kind of looks like the team's best safety at this point, and which is not how I think people viewed it going into camp. There were a lot of question marks about whether Epps could be the second safety. I don't know. Like, again, the way he's played this camp, and honestly, the way he played for part of last season, I think that he, has turned himself into a respectable starting quality safety, which is something that was a big question coming into camp. And I think he's starting to answer those questions.
One of the biggest moments of Marcus Epps' offseason was him opening a gym back in his home, his native of Southern California. He had Jalen Hurts there for the grand opening. He's had teammates come through and train there during the offseason, and he's carried that momentum into camp. Like what we said, 1 week in, Marcus Epps has definitely made his point for that starting safety spot. EJ, if your dad is tuned in, I feel like he might enjoy this next question from Big Mike NM. Big Mike NM asks, has Devin Allen been getting any action? Is there any realistic shot he makes the team? Mike is obviously alluding to wide receiver Devin Allen, the Olympian hurdler that the Eagles brought in, signed during this offseason. What's been your Devin Allen take, EJ? We've had several practices now to be able to watch him up close, literally just feet away from us. Again, to reiterate the question, just reading it again, has Devin Allen been getting any action and any realistic shot he makes the team?
Yeah, so my dad is like crazy about this guy. Like he won't stop asking me about him. My uncle used to be a hurdler. My dad was a track coach, so like they love the track guys in football. But yeah, I mean, as far as like how he's looked on the field, I think you can tell that receiver is something that he hasn't played receiver in a while. I think it's fair to say that. The straight line speed jumps out at you right away. The way he can get off the ball is like startling. But the way he gets out of breaks, catching the football hasn't really been as impressive, I would say, at this point in camp. Now, maybe, a couple more weeks at it, knocks off the rust. He really impresses people. I think the way that he makes his team is by being a great punt returner, being a great kick returner. Maybe the team sees value in that. Because again, like when he gets the ball, his first, 4 steps, that get up and go is like, you can tell he's an Olympian. Even in pads, you can tell that guy's got some world-class speed. And I think that they are looking for punt returners and kick returners right now. So, maybe a Devin Allen, either a touchdown or a really, really good punt returner, kick return in the preseason game kind of flips the script for him. But right now, I don't know. I wouldn't bet on him being one of the, the 5th or the 6th receiver to make the team right now. Sorry to my dad.
Yeah, when you talk about those final spots at each position, Devin Allen could certainly make his case if he puts together a strong camp, but the team really seems to be high on Britton Covey, an undrafted wide receiver, another guy vying another guy vying for that returner job, which currently Jalen Reagor has hold of. But again, they've got many guys in the mix there. EJ, one more question. Let's go to Matthew Miller here, who asked, are the Eagles switching to a 3-4? EJ, I addressed this question to you because we kind of talked about fronts. earlier. I'll go ahead and let you, handle this question, the multiple Jonathan Gannon type defense.
Yeah, like we said earlier, like the 3-4, 4-3 thing is kind of like antiquated at this point. A lot of teams run both, and the Eagles are going to run both. Like, last year they ran both, and this year I think they'll lean even more into running whatever it is that they think will give them the advantage. I think that, just based off of conversations we've had with Jonathan Gannon, based off of just watching his defense for a year, I think you're going to see a lot of that 3-4, which is really like 5 guys on the line of scrimmage. You're going to see a lot of that on passing downs, because I think he really likes to get all 5 of those guys one-on-one matchups against, offensive linemen in passing situations. I think that you'll see a lot of that during, third downs or second and long, but I do think that you'll see some base front 4-3, 4-man fronts. I think you'll see both a lot. I don't think that it's going to be like, we'll like call back to like the Billy Davis days where they were true 3-4, defensive linemen were 2-gapping. Like, it's not going to be like that, I don't think. I think it's going to be whatever it is that Gannon thinks is best, for the scheme, and I think you're going to see both.
All right, EJ, we are going to stick right there with the defensive line. You picked out our tweet of the week. It comes from a very familiar face. Could you go ahead and run us through this week's tweet of the week?
Yeah, it's a shameless self-plug this time. It's just my own tweets. But yeah, I mean, honestly, the one-on-ones, offensive line, defensive line one-on-ones are some of the most interesting things you'll pick up from camp. Those are really, really valuable reps. They tell you a lot about where people are at. Obviously, the offensive linemen have a little bit of a disadvantage in that situation. It's obvious pass. They don't have help. But you still see a lot of things that will help you kind of get an idea of who's ahead of who. And I mean, the 2 biggest takeaways, let's stick with the rookies. Jordan Davis had a couple of like wow reps. He had some reps that were a little bit less, startlingly good. I'd say he had a couple that, he didn't win every rep he had, but there were some reps he had where the wins were definitive. To Ben Fennell, he works for NFL Network and is always at the Eagles camp. He made an observation on Twitter, like, Jordan Davis is such a big guy that you kind of have to quick set him. Like, you kind of have to get right up in his face and, kind of stop his momentum, because you don't want a guy that big having momentum coming right at you. So you got to go right after him. But Jordan Davis is such a good athlete that if you go right at him, he's quick enough to get by you, which is what happened with Jack Anderson. He kind of sidestepped him, sort of did a little swim move that knocked Jack Anderson out of the ground. When I first watched it, I thought he ripped him to the ground, but, kind of like talking it through with some other people who had better vantage points, like, no, he just was quick enough to make him touch earth, as the kids like to say. So, Jordan Davis, like, his quickness really stands out. He's had a couple really good reps in pass rush. And then Cam Jurgens, not just yesterday, but today, I mean, he's really, I'll be honest, like, that's one of the biggest things that surprised me about camp so far is, like, he is really strong. He was billed as this undersized athletic center, just like Jason Kelce. And I sort of assumed, okay, this guy's not going to be able to anchor against really big, powerful defensive tackles. Not at all. This guy, everybody's been trying to bull rush this guy since, the beginning of camp. And I've seen him hold up almost every single time. The reps I've seen of him, he's looked really good against a bull rush, which is going to be huge for him, because like that's the MO with like small athletic centers. That's the drawback. If he can overcome that, not only do I think he's going to be a really good center in the league, I also think that he can play guard this year if they need him to. I mean, if he's strong enough to play it, it doesn't matter that he's a little bit smaller. So yeah, I'd say that those 2 picks, those offensive and defensive line prioritizations that Howie Roseman always makes, like, they definitely seem like they're paying off, at least at this point in camp. And, we finally get to see these guys in pads, and they did well again today. So yeah, I'd say it's an encouraging sign for the rookie class.
Nebraska coach Scott Frost, I spoke to him on the phone several weeks ago before camp began, and his overall message to me was, watch out for Cam. If he fights his way into a rotation spot, essentially forces the Eagles to throw him in there, whether it be at right guard. Obviously, he'll be the backup to Jason Kelce. But again, Jurgens and Jordan Davis both having strong camps through 1 week. EJ, it might be a little premature, but let's go with some predictions. Obviously, the Eagles have the Jets and then the Browns and Dolphins in the preseason. And then, they've got to submit that 53-man roster at the end of the month. And then in September, really going into October, EJ, they have a pretty favorable schedule. When the schedule actually released, we had our initial predictions. I think I had the Eagles at 10 or 11 victories. I think I'm sticking with that. I think that, I got to stand by that. We've only had about a week to really evaluate the players and, how Nick Sirianni will adapt heading into year two. Last year, they had 9 victories. EJ, do they meet that? Do they exceed that total? I think, from a team perspective, goal, as they set these goals for this season, they want to eclipse that mark, and they also want to move, probably more importantly, but move further into the playoffs. You mentioned the loss to the Buccaneers last year. I'm not exactly sure where they go in the playoffs, but I do have this team winning at least 10 games.
Yeah, I'm with you. I feel like the way the schedule fell for them was very favorable. The thing that like I'm a little bit hung up on is like last year they got off to that slow start, sort of had to figure out what kind of team they are. I don't think they can afford to do that this year. They've got a softer schedule to start the year. If they lose some of those games early in the year that maybe you sort of look at right now and go, those should be wins, the schedule toughens up toward the end of the year and they can find themselves in some trouble. That said, I'm with you. I think that 10 or 11 wins is very, very feasible. I really do think, I mean, this isn't I don't think you need an expert opinion to have this opinion, but, I think it's really going to come down to what Hurts can do. Can he win games both ways? Can he win games as the creator, being someone who makes plays out in space and with his legs? And can he also win games if they contain him in a pocket, keep him from rolling out to his right? Can he make the right decisions from the pocket to win games that way too? I could see if he takes a step, I could see them winning 12 games. I could see them, if he takes the necessary steps, I could see them making noise in the playoffs. But at some point, the Eagles are going to have to kind of evolve to be a multiple team, on both sides of the ball, be able to win different ways offensively and defensively. If that's this year, then I could see them going further than they did last year. But at the very least, I'm with you. I think that double-digit wins is pretty feasible for this team based off the schedule and the talent that they have.
You heard it here at Gameday Central. EJ and I are both going with double-digit wins for these Eagles. Time will, we've got to see if that is enough to win the NFC East. Again, the Eagles have a very favorable schedule to begin the season. September 11th at the Detroit Lions is where it all begins for Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. EJ, it is time to wrap up. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to Inquirer Live at Gameday Central, presented by Xfinity. Make sure to stick around all throughout training camp at inquirer.com/Eagles Gameday to follow with us as we live tweet throughout the entire preseason, all throughout the regular season. Get your game-related news and also post your comments and questions, and we'll have a chance to read them during our next show. Again, for EJ Smith, I am Josh Tolentino. Thanks for tuning in to Gameday Central, presented by Xfinity.
See you soon.